Well, hello, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
Okay, so I guess we're live. We're happening, right? Hi, everyone watching in the universe. My name is J. Anthony Allen. I go by J and he, him pronouns. And you are in the Supporting the Educational Pathways for Future Music Generations panel. I'll just, well, I don't need to read the description. I'm sure you've read it if you're here and you know that this is interesting to you. I think what we'll do here is just kind of go around the grid and make introductions. So tell us about who you are, what your interest in this topic is, or your stake in this topic is, and also I think relevant is what your organization is and who you are representing or who you represent. So we'll go. I'm just going to go around the grid the way I see it. So we'll start with Allegra.
Great. Hi, my name is Allegra Wallingford, and I am the managing director of an organization called She Rock, She Rock. We empower girls, women, trans, and non-binary folks through the art of music, and we are in the middle of COVID education, so we do a lot of virtual programming. That's why I'm here.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Bart.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bart Johnson. I'm the executive director of the Minneapolis School of New Music. We want to provide an arts education to young people. We're starting out as a middle school, grades 6 through 8, and we're going all the way up through high school eventually. So we think music is important, so important that we believe it'll actually help students in all other parts of their education. So I'm really excited to be here and good to see all of you.
Great, thanks, Bart. And to Jenny.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My volume's being weird. Hey, I'm Jenny Case. I'm a freelance musician here in the Twin Cities, mostly a guitar and bass player. I have a studio. I do a lot of recording. And I've been in this music scene for almost 30 years, surrounded by a lot of men. So in 2007, I founded Girls Rock and Roll Retreat, which was Minnesota's first girls rock camp. And then in 2009, co-founded She Rock, She Rock, which was the organization that Allegra mentioned. We empower girls, women, non-binary, and trans folks through the art of music. And yeah, this is our 15th year, and I'm really excited to be here and see what happens. Thanks.
You're on mute, Jay.
Awesome. Well, that's allowed to happen just once per person. So you're allowed to do that once. So yeah, quick, my background is I started and run a company called Slam Academy. We focus on music education, specifically electronic music focused work. We do classes in the evenings mostly, but also during the day sometimes for all ages are welcome. We have some summer programs. I also run the music business program at Augsburg University, where I am assistant professor there. So let's dive in. So let's first talk about kind of the first thing on our list was what are some new in development programs that you would like to share about your organization? I know, Allegra, you mentioned COVID, and I wonder if we can kind of pair this question with that topic of how has COVID spawned new programs, perhaps, in your organization. So if you don't mind, let's start with you, Allegra.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was mentioning COVID because starting in March of last year, obviously we had to do like emergency contingency planning, which led to our first virtual Girls Rock and Roll Retreat, which is our summer camp for kids who are 9 to 16 years old, and usually takes place in person and involves a lot of instruments and a big space. And last year took place completely on Zoom. And it was a pilot program that really went well, and we decided to keep doing virtual programming during the fall and winter and spring now. And we'll be doing another summer of Girls Rock and Roll Retreat online this year, but we're hoping to be back in person next year. We have an adult program that we've been running since January called Studiolab for adults that uses an online platform called Soundtrap that's similar to GarageBand and allows people to collaborate from a distance, which is cool because it works in real time. And so we've been using that for our programming, and it's been going really well. We found that a lot of students also have been kind of preferring this type of learning due to discomfort being in groups or like overstimulation, which is, what our summer camps are. They're really loud and fun, but not really for everyone. So we've been enjoying our virtual programming and hope to keep doing some in the future, even when we can go back to in person.
Yeah, that's great. I have found, and I guess this question for everyone, have you found that there are students who take better to the online education than the in-person thing? I think it's a fascinating thing to explore. I'm sure there's going to be like a million people that write papers about that in the next academic journal season. Bart, let's go to you with the same question.
Well, our whole school is, I think, embarking on a brand new way to do music in education. So the whole school is a whole academic program. Basically, what we are trying to do is have the whole academic day steeped in music as much as possible and wherever it's appropriate. So we're taking a humanities approach, using music as the thread that links, history, literature, and the arts together throughout, the timeline of history. So we're looking at that as a way to give kids context for everything and what they really love is music. So letting them see how music has influenced history and how it has been influenced by history, and how, again, literature and texts have been influenced by music and vice versa. And then on top of that, they'll obviously get to learn a music discipline. They'll get lessons in that discipline, whether it's an instrument, vocal, or electronic music genre of a music discipline. They'll get to learn from the experts in that particular discipline, and then they'll get to learn how to record their own music and play it. And they'll get to do all that for free in a public charter school setting. So we're excited about that, and we think if more people knew about it, they would want to sign on as well. So I guess that's my big pitch, is I think people should know about this. So please pass it on, because I think there's a great need for it, especially when you consider that music is actually being cut out of a lot of public schools to focus on other discipline areas, and it's sort of taking all the joy and creativity out of kids' education. And like I said before, music actually enhances students' abilities to read and do math and to think. So they're sort of taking all the fuel out of the fire for the love of learning. And we ascribe to do the exact opposite. We want kids to love school, to love to be creative, and to want to come to school every day and learn. And we think music can do that.
And you're still taking enrollments, right, for the next term?
Yes. We open in the fall, and we will be accepting enrollments. We have a cap of 100 students in grades 6, 7, and 8, and we'll be accepting enrollments up until the start of the school year, unless we hit our cap.
Cool. Jenny, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, Allegra covered most of the new stuff that we're doing. What I would say is we had been doing some Ableton, as you know, Jay, in the past, and that was awesome. But one thing that I've definitely noticed with Soundtrap, now there's another program called BandLab that's very similar. Like Allegra said, they're kind of a off take of GarageBand, but we're finding a lot more of our kids and adults have an easier time. It just seems like a much more accessible and inclusive program or DAW than Ableton is, and it's a great stepping stone into Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools, etc. So I think a lot of our community comes to our programs almost scared, like with this idea that there's no way they're going to be able to figure this out. It's so complicated. So we've had 2 of these adult programs now using Studiolab, and I think, or using Soundtrap, called Studiolab. And the adults have just been blown away that they can actually use this stuff and figure it out and create music with it. And the stuff that the kids created last year during the 4 weeks of summer camp also was amazing. So yeah, I think it's a great stepping stone into other things.
And those are browser-based applications.
They're browser-based, so it all goes up to the cloud. So what's cool about it too is that they work on PCs, Macs, all your Androids, iPhones, and your and tablets, anything. So they're just, like I said, they're really accessible to anybody that has an internet connection, really.
Yeah. And what do we call those? Netbooks? What am I thinking of? Like the Google
Chromebooks.
Chromebooks. Sorry, I'm Chromebooks, which I know like a lot of school kids are getting like issued a Chromebook, and that basically locks them out from using something like Ableton. So I've toyed with these programs. They're super great. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, they're no Ableton.
Right.
But they're a really great stepping stone. I'm just always trying to put myself into the shoes of someone who knows nothing. As a teacher, I'm always doing that as well. Just when I have a beginner guitar student, every once in a while, I'll try to like turn my guitar over and play left-handed and remember how hard it is when you don't know. So
that's a cool idea.
Just it's so overwhelming when you're a complete newbie. You're a kid that knows nothing, or especially some of the adults that we work with. They're by day they're a secretary, and they played flute when they were in 6th grade, and that's all the music they've had in their entire life. And they just come into it thinking there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out. And so they've been very successful, and they keep working on it. They keep doing it even after the classes, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's great. I want to invite anyone who's watching to submit a comment in the comments thing. I assume you have a box or something that I can't see, but there is a comment and a question in. It's getting pretty heavy, so I think we'll just dive into the heavy stuff and answer this person's question, or try to. So here's the question: why do you think music and art has been underfunded? I have always wondered about this. Perhaps music is subliminally political, ? I really have never understood why. So I think this is probably spinning off something you said, Bart, about how we're kind of a lot in schools, we're losing a lot of music education. Why do we think that is, actually? Do you want to take a stab at it, Bart, or anyone?
Well, I can tell you why it is. It's because of this, what I call the age of accountability, or in education, there's ever since No Child Left Behind in the 90s, schools are judged on their test results, and the only things that everybody can test are reading and math. You can't really test other things. And so all the focus gets, I shouldn't say you can't test other things, but you can't test reliably across the board. And, reading and math are the ones that everybody focuses on. And so that's where all the resources go. And it's like, I've been in public education for 22 years now. And from what I've seen, we've been trying to sort of parse the solution and figure it out by going so microscopic into what it takes to be a good reader or good at math that we've sort of forgotten that the brain needs to be nourished and it needs to be inspired. And in music and art inspire people, and actually it trains their brain to synapses to be formed that in other situations wouldn't be formed, and that actually helps with more sophisticated thinking, which helps with processing and with math and reading and all that. So basically, we're taking away this great influence on cognition by taking away arts and music and things that actually help kids do better with reading and math and everything else. So why are they doing that? Because they're just looking at the problem, and they're trying to put all their resources at the thing that they see as the problem, and they're sort of forgetting about like the fact that we send our kids to school to be educated as well-rounded people, and we're in this. Everybody's in education for life, whether you're in school or not. So some people learn things when they're in young. Some people learn things when they're out of school, but that's, I guess, I think we're missing something by trying to sort of pick things apart to a point where there's nothing left. You can't, like, after you split an atom and you get into quarks and all that stuff, there's nothing left, right? And that's what I think we're trying to do with education and with reading and math especially. Like, why isn't this working? Well, because maybe they need to be inspired in other ways in order to get better at reading and math. That's my take.
Allegra or Jenny, do either of you want to chime in on this topic?
I was just curious what the person who wrote the question meant about the political angle. Or does anyone have any ideas about what they meant about that? Like, are they saying that some of these like budget cuts might be political in nature? Maybe. It's a big conversation to have.
I think any budget cut is inherently political.
Mm-hmm.
If the government's making it, but is it because musicians and art folk tend to be more liberal people, and it's a way to cut back on them? I don't know if I don't know. I haven't read any serious research on this, on the political element of cutback, so I don't remember. So yeah, I don't know.
But I agree with Bart. I think just the budget cuts that are happening, and they don't see the value of the arts because, mom wants you to grow up and be a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, who cares if you can play the clarinet or draw something, make a sculpture? So yeah, I agree with what Bart said.
Let's maybe tease this out in a different direction. So we're Allegra and Jenny especially, but I think all of us, we're using music education as a tool for equity in many ways in our own organizations. I wonder if we could all talk about that a little bit. And I'm kind of drawing a thin line between this topic and this idea of equity. But what I'm thinking is when we take music out of public education, this idea of music having the ability to be equitable is something that we're missing out on, right? Like among many other things. But Allegra or Jenny, do you want to comment on that idea of music as equitable practice?
Yeah, I guess I can start. I mean, the whole reason that She-Rock was founded was because of such a giant lack of equity and just like the access that women had to the music industry was like very minimal. You had to know the right people to get gigs, and you had to have a lot of experience to even be considered for things. And it's like, how do I start if I haven't been in a band before? And these are still questions that, you know, our community faces today, but there is at least a community there to support them. So I can still see it and think that there is a huge necessity for people intentionally going into communities and saying like, hey, you might be scared to play music, you maybe have never tried it or don't think that it's for you, but like just come into this low stress environment where, you know, we've created a safe space for you to express yourself, and whatever that ends up sounding like is totally cool, and we want to hear it on Friday at this concert that everybody comes to. So yeah, I think it's a big issue and a persistent one that we shouldn't sweep under the rug.
I think in terms also of just equity, like we've talked a lot about why aren't we getting this community or this community coming to our programs? And a lot of it has to do with where we're located or where we're, you know, whatever. And we've talked about maybe we need to be going into the schools to be more equitable that way. And then it kind of comes down to also where if we have enough funding to be able to offer this at no cost, like it would be if they were in schools. So we struggle with the funding piece, obviously, like any other nonprofit would. So equity is like our number one thing that we think about, and it's so hard, but we do want to take that place of what's missing in schools right now in the arts.
And do you still do sliding scale?
We try really hard. Yeah, we still do right now, and we do have openings for our summer programs that are sliding scale. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Mm. To this day, we've never turned down anyone for an inability to pay.
Oh wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out of that conversation, Bart. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think, you know, when I think back to how I got started in music, it was with private lessons that my mom and dad paid for. So there are a lot of kids whose parents can't afford to pay for piano lessons, guitar lessons, whatever. That is a huge equity issue. And so getting kids involved in music should not be determined by whether they can afford it or not. It should be determined upon whether they want to. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, when you add music to anything for children, almost always it improves, you know, their level of excitement or their level of enjoyment for that thing. So I think humans are naturally musical and want to play music. And the equity issue for me is that in lots of neighborhoods, their kids don't have the access to it, and because of that, they're not playing. It's not because they don't want to; it's because they don't have the opportunities to do it. And so that's where I think all of our organizations come in to figure out how we can get kids involved in music. In our case, we are basically saying you can, if you want to play piano, you can have free piano lessons for 7 years. If you come to school or whatever that instrument or music discipline is, the school will pick it up. And so our business model is it is definitely based on making equity and access to music one of the principal commitments that we make to kids.
Yeah, we have a similar problem at Augsburg where, Augsburg is a college, so it's like it's career training, is what we're supposed to be doing. And then we have an issue where someone comes in and they play the violin, for example, and they're smoking. They just sound great. Uh, and they have had access to lessons since they were 3 years old. And then we've got another person who comes in and plays violin, not so good. They've never been able to afford to take lessons ever in their life. And so we end up in this kind of tough spot where we're like, how do we compare these two, and are they equally deserving? They might be equally as talented. That audition did not tell us if they are equally as talented, right? It told us that one had access to lessons and they thrived in that environment, which is awesome on them. But it didn't tell us whether the other one would have given that same access. So we end up doing a lot of guesswork is the wrong word, but a lot of trying to assess potential and future success in a certain career. I mean, at some point we have to kind of sit back and say, we're not Juilliard. We're not like training people to be the best violinists in the world. We're training people to have a career as a music educator or music therapist or something like that. So, but it's an interesting little dance you have to do to accommodate for that.
We run into that a little bit with trying to find teachers for our programs as well. Because so the teachers, the community we're looking at are, like we've said, women, non-binary, and trans folks. And a lot of these folks have imposter syndrome and they don't think they're qualified to be able to call themselves a teacher, even though maybe they are, they play in a band and they've been playing for their entire lives. So one of our commitments has been to try to get as many of these people as possible. And actually, like, we will train you in to teach at our programs, at our camps. And eventually we have, depending on funding, we've been wanting to have like private lessons be a part of our program where we are able to then train those teachers and those teachers who don't think that they are good enough to be a private lesson teacher to be able to teach lessons and then to be able to offer scholarships to students to get those lessons and be able to pay the teachers. So, but I've, like I mentioned before, I've been teaching private lessons for almost 30 years, and it's a total equity thing. I mean, a lot of my students have and always will be probably from the western suburbs, South Minneapolis. I've had a couple of really cool parents during the pandemic offer to pay for lessons for other kids who can't afford it, which is like awesome. And that has never happened before the pandemic. So, but there just needs to be more of that. And we've done a little bit of it with She-Rock, but like I said, it's kind of a funding thing. But it's one of our goals that we want to be able to have anybody that wants to take private lessons be able to, because I think the accessibility is even better now with Zoom lessons just being a normal thing. So you don't even need a place to teach anymore. You can just teach out of your living room. And we also offer instruments. We have 2 storage spaces full of guitars, basses, amps, drum sets, like all the stuff. And it's just like, we just want people to have the instruments and borrow them throughout the year. So we've been doing that to address equity also.
That's awesome. That kind of segues well into our next question, which is, what do young people need right now to be encouraged and nurtured in music? Access to instruments is, I think, perhaps relatively trivial on that list, but well, not trivial, an important thing. Does anyone else want to run with this question a little bit?
I would chime in on this one because this was a big reason why Girls Rock and Roll Retreat and She-Rock was started, and I wanted to do it is girls, and I'll expand this gender expansive community that we have, girls, non-binary, trans. They need to see role models who look like them. They need to see that representation. And so it's this like never ending cycle of a girl, let's just say, who does not have this on her radar at all and would never be able to go into this because they don't know that that's a possibility for them. And then they don't grow up to then be the role model for someone else. And so it's just this never ending cycle. I can't remember I have to read this, but from Women's Audio Mission, they have this statistic of less than 5% of the people creating the sounds, music, and media in the daily soundtrack of our lives are women and non-binary folks. So, and I just think it's because of that lack of representation, the lack of role models, whether it's, gender or anything else. We just need a more diverse crew of teachers. So like when girls walk into Girls Rock camp on Monday mornings of camp, they see these 30 just like killer women, non-binary trans folks up on stage, just like rocking out. And like, you'll never see that in real life. It's always guys. No offense to guys, but it's just like, it's always been mostly guys. And that's how my whole life has been too. Like all the bands, all the studio projects, everything. It's like, I'm the only woman ever. So anyway, my big thing there is role models, representation.
That's great. And I couldn't agree more. I think at Slam, we really believe in the probably 80% of our job as music teachers is to inspire people, to like inspire them to want to do it, to do more, to show them that you can do this. And a lot of that is putting role models in front of the class and on the stage that they identify with. I will not claim that Slam is categorically awesome at that. We are not as diverse as I wish we were, but it's something we're always working on. But it is also why when She-Rock knocked on our door with the Beats by Girls project, we did everything we could do to help make that happen. Yeah, anyone else want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I can. So definitely representation is huge. I think also kids need safe spaces to express themselves and practice music. I mean, both physically, kids need a space to go practice music. And also they need a space where they can feel free to express themselves, like where their parents aren't just sitting there like watching their every move as they navigate through a song with people. Especially like teenagers, they just want to kind of find their voice. And I think it's really important to have spaces where they feel comfortable doing that. And in addition to that, they need people to help connect them to the broader music industry if that's what they're hoping to do. If they want to record an album, who should they talk to? If they want to play a gig, where should they start and who should they talk to? Just people who kind of already have the know-how, who can help connect them to the right spaces.
I'd like to just agree with all of that and say that I think young people need the space to sort of be able to play or to be creative without being judged. And that often means like having a place, like a room all to themselves for a while and just being creative in there. It also means that they need to be in a place, in a community, like a school. I'm thinking about a school community where other people are accepting and not judging, or better yet, really encouraging people to be themselves and to, be weird and creative and kooky and whatever, because you remember middle school, everybody. I mean, being yourself was the last thing we wanted to do. We wanted to fit in. We wanted to fit in with other people so we wouldn't get, teased or whatever, or we wouldn't be ostracized. Or that's not what helps people be creative. That stifles creativity. So wherever we are as educators, I think the primary thing that we need to do is create or help to nurture an environment that accepts people for who they are and encourages people to really be who they are. People have to be cool and encouraging, and that's how we all do our best work, when people are saying, like you've all said, like you can do it. We want you to try this. And that's just not natural for a lot of young people. They're very shy to start something because they don't want to do it wrong. I think Jenny was talking about trying to think about it from the beginner's perspective. We have people come in and are very reluctant just to like pick up a drumstick and bang on something, even if there's nobody's expecting them to be awesome or anything. It's just let's just play. And that's, I think, the idea is get them to not just to play music, but to feel like they're in an environment of play where, like kids just pick up stuff and play with it like toys. But that's important too. They need to be in an environment where play is encouraged and expected. So I guess those are things that I think young people need to do their best work and to be inspired in music.
To kind of echo what Bart was saying about having this encouraging space, like one of the things that we do at our programs to set the stage for that is right off the bat is we have this, it's a rule. So it sounds like it's going to be scary because it's a rule, but we have a rule where folks aren't allowed to apologize for making mistakes. Instead, they have to say, "I rock." So we train them in that they can apologize if you hurt someone's feelings or whatnot. But they, if they accidentally apologize, then other people are allowed to correct them and say, "You rock." So just like from day one, I think that's the kind of atmosphere that needs to be made to make, that's one of the things you can do to, it's an idea at least.
I remember you all were doing some event, maybe it was a Beats by Girls event, at the Slam Academy space, and I was kind of tucked away up in the loft where I could hear what was going on, and I heard all of this I rock, you rock stuff, and I was just cracking up. I thought it was so funny before I figured out what you were doing. And I just thought it was beautiful. It's just a really wonderful way, especially when you've got the younger kids saying that, that using that lingo to acknowledge their mistakes, sort of, I guess. I don't know, I just thought it was great. I think it's a really brilliant idea.
We have our community trained so well that if someone accidentally says it over the microphone at an event or performance, the whole audience will immediately respond with, "You rock." It's pretty cool.
That's great. And you sign emails, you rock also, don't you?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, should we move on to maybe something different? Next question was, what are the barriers for entry for young musicians? And what is your organization doing to address that? We've talked about this quite a bit, but maybe before passing on it, is there anything anyone wants to add to that conversation? Barriers to entry. I'll say for us at Slam, other than finance, other than money, it's technology. We have, we teach people to make music on a laptop or on their computer. And when we started Slam, we did it on a nothing budget. And we just thought, we're not going to have a computer lab. That was like rule number one. We're not going to have a computer lab. We're just going to expect people to bring their own laptops because everybody has a laptop, right? And it wasn't until down the road a little bit where we were like, wait, we are actually limiting who can come here because of this everybody has a laptop assumption. So we do have a laptop cart now for loaners, but that access to technology, even with the laptop loaner cart, there's still an assumption that if you're going to do this work, like if you're going to be a DJ, you're going to show up to the gig with a laptop, or more and more expensive gear, right? So technology is a big barrier, not to mention just how people approach technology and learning the technology, which, as we already talked about earlier, can be daunting and scary if you're not used to being in front of that. So that's ours.
I think I was kind of thinking something about like family support, because not just with our organization, but even with my private lessons, I feel like there's so much more emphasis on mom or dad supporting their sporting endeavors than their arts endeavors. So it's like, oh, once a week, Wednesdays at 6:00. I don't think we can make that work for piano lessons, but I'll have them in soccer 4 nights a week. And so I think the family support thing is pretty big. Like if a kid wants to start a band and they're only 13 years old, mom or dad needs to drive them around. They need to find a practice space where they're going to be able to be loud and have a drum set. And so there needs to be a lot of family support with that. And so I think that's a barrier for a lot of people, that they don't have that. But yeah, access to instruments. It's like, we can get you the instruments, but like we don't have a space right now, so we can't provide a place for your band to practice. But that's kind of where I think it's been nice for us delving into the technology piece with, Beats by Girls and using Soundtrap and all that, is because we don't need this giant rock band setup that's super loud. It's just a laptop or your phone or your iPad and some headphones, and there you go. So that's actually been made us, I think, what we do more inclusive and accessible. But yeah, you can't assume that everybody has a laptop, because that's just definitely not the case. I think with the online camps we've done, the online programs we've done too, the other piece that's been hard is people's internet connections. So you can't just assume that everyone has high-speed internet. And even when they do, it's not always guaranteed that they're going to have a great connection. So that's been an obstacle with our online programming.
Yeah, internet connection. That's a good point. Anybody else want to chime in? Sorry, I'm reading a question right now. Hold on. Actually, this is relevant to what Jenny said, and really interesting. So what it says is, from a public school, when you come from a family that cannot afford college, it is much more probable to hope for a sports scholarship than a music scholarship. That's a point. Augsburg has a lot of music scholarships. I guess I don't know what sports scholarships even are, or if there are a lot of them, because I'm just a music dork. But I don't know if it compares to what we have in music. But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of people get through college on sports scholarships. Okay, let's go into another question. Let's move on to kind of something completely different. What recommendations do you have for people, and let's maybe focus in on younger musicians, like young professional musicians, let's say, that want to get into education? Anyone want to dive in on that? Like Jenny, you've been teaching private lessons for a really long time.
Yeah.
How did you get started?
I dropped out of high school, and I'm like probably very different than a lot of educators in that way. So I briefly went to music tech, but I didn't even graduate from there, because I think I'm just kind of had this like anti-authoritarian thing going on since I was very young, and no one's going to tell me what to do. But I had a great mentor. When I was 16 years old, I was taking lessons from a guitar teacher at a little music store in Excelsior. And he got me started teaching lessons when I was 16. And he mentored me, and he told me, you don't have to be, a pro. You just have to know how to teach and how to put yourself in the shoes of a beginner, like we were talking about earlier. And I watched him teach every instrument that he had in the store. And he was just really like so on everything, but he could teach, because he knew about music. And he handed me a flute, which I didn't play, and he got me my first student. It was a flute student. And he handed me a flute and a method book, and he said, well, you play clarinet, so go home and learn flute. And so I've just kind of taken that my whole life, and I've never, I'm not rich, but I've never been like completely broke, because I can always fall back on teaching beginner piano lessons. Like everybody wants their kids to take beginner piano lessons. So I think from my perspective, like one of the biggest pieces I would say for people is, if you want to get into like teaching private lessons, is try to be able to teach as many instruments as possible, and just know that you don't have to like excel at every instrument. Like you have to know how to be a good teacher, how to put yourself in their shoes, and even just like stay just a few lessons ahead of them. Like you don't have to be, a virtuoso on what you teach. One of the greatest drum teachers I ever took from I've played in a band with him, and I would never play in a band with him because I don't think he's that great, but he's a great teacher. So that's my advice.
Wait, I'm going to maybe blow your mind for a minute. What was the name of that teacher at the Excelsior Music Shop one?
Oh, Bob Bushnell?
No, okay.
No.
Not to take us too far off course, but when I moved to Minnesota, this was 2003 or 4-ish. I basically paid my way through grad school teaching guitar lessons, and I got a job teaching at this weird church in Excelsior that was maybe like,
is it Mount Calvary?
Yeah. It was like a block away from this little music store. So I knew that guy. I thought for a second though that you were heading towards like you took music lessons there at that church from this weird guitar player, and I was like, oh shit, that was me. But that would have been funny.
This was like back in the early 90s. So.
Oh, okay. Then I'm safe.
Yeah. I actually went to preschool at Mount Calvary, FYI.
Oh yeah, they had a preschool there. I remember.
Yeah.
That was actually a very fun program. I've had a few years teaching out of churches, and that was one of the better ones. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to chime in on this topic?
I mean, I'm not by trade a music educator, but I did teach at Girls Rock and Roll Camp before I came into this role. Like as a teenager, I was a junior counselor, and that was one of the most valuable experiences I've had, and just like learning to be a guide and a mentor to younger people, which is what is a teacher if not that? So I think that just like jumping in with both feet and getting any experience that you can before you're entering your field officially will really benefit you.
And I'm not a music educator myself. And I think maybe the question is more for people teaching lessons, but what I would say is, I think thinking about it from the perspective of the student, even if you don't think that you are a virtuoso in your music discipline, often you can offer some advice or feedback or questions even that gets the student to improve, even if you're not like, I think that's probably what Jenny was referring to, sort of pushing people sort of intellectually or philosophically in a certain direction helps break down some of the internal barriers to learning. So that's how it is. I'm a science teacher by trade. So I mean, I play music, but I just think that oftentimes, especially with the arts, a lot of the things that make people sort of hit a wall or plateau are like mental things or things that they wouldn't necessarily try unless somebody told them to try it. And you don't need to play any instrument to tell somebody to try something that they hadn't tried before. So anyway, I just think thinking about it from a perspective of what does the student need, not am I good at that instrument? What does the student need in order to get better?
And sometimes all the student needs is someone to talk to. So a lot of times you just end up being part therapist too. And that's really important, just that kind of that mentorship piece like Allegra was talking about.
Yeah, I remember when I was teaching guitar lessons, I jokingly referred to myself as not a guitar teacher, but as an amateur therapist. That's a lot of what I did, especially at that Mount Calvary place for some reason. I think because I had like most of my students were like freshmen, sophomores in high school, and they would come in and tell me about so and so's doing something, and I'm like, oh no, that's G chord, C chord. It was really hard actually, and eventually I think that's kind of what led me to leave uh, teaching guitar lessons in that kind of one-on-one. And I still don't love teaching one-on-one anymore, mostly because of that. I feel like these students were bringing like real issues, and I was just really unqualified to help them. I'm scared to think of what happened to some of those students and the crappy advice I gave them.
You should be present during Girls Rock Camp.
I don't think I want to. I mean, I do. I love everything you guys do, but
I feel like all of our teachers need to be part psychologist. I mean, it's heavy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think they're to clarify what I was saying is I think being a private lesson teacher or even a group teacher with younger kids is like takes that level of it takes a understanding of psychology and emotions in kids and all of this stuff, and it's just something I didn't have, and I was just like, oh. So if you have teachers that are good at that, then hold on to them. Yeah. Anything else on this topic?
I wanted to do a quick just describe one of the things we do also, and it's been a little lax during COVID, but we've always had a junior counselor program at our summer camps. And so a lot of like Allegra alluded to 2015, you were a junior counselor or you were a junior teacher, I think. Mm-hmm. And our previous co-executive director, Sam Stallman, kind of came up through the organization, started as a junior counselor, became assistant program director. So we have a lot of people like starting off as campers and then kind of coming up through, and they enter the junior counselor program, and then they become a teacher, and then who knows what. So that's been really cool with She-Rock, something we've been really proud of.
That's another good way to look at the same question. Like for all of us, when you're hiring teachers, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a music degree? Or are you looking for an education degree, maybe in Bart's case? Or what do you do? I mean, I get, as you all probably do, I get emails probably, I don't know, once a week or so with someone who wants to teach at SLAM. And the answer is usually not right now. But what do you look for? What do you look for in a teacher?
I think in our case, there are basically two ways to look at this. One is we do need a licensed teacher to teach, music theory and things like that, the standards that are expected to be taught. But remember that every student chooses their own discipline, and we bring in adjunct teachers, such as Jenny or Jay or people from SLAM or people from Blue Tree or wherever to come in and teach. So we're looking for great people that inspire kids, and we've met so many of those people that don't have a teaching license but are really great teachers. So I think that's what we look for. We look for, what would you want? What would you want who would you want to have for a teacher? Would you want to have this person for a teacher? If the answer is yes, then that's usually a good sign. And then thinking about, if I had a child, would I want this person teaching my child? And that they can be a virtuoso and still not be able to teach their way out of a paper bag. and vice versa. They can just know 3 chords, but be an awesome teacher. So I guess I think we've all been sort of saying that, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I had a teacher once who would say, you don't, it was a composition teacher, and he'd say, you don't want to study composition with Mozart. Like, he'd be a terrible teacher because he just knew it. It was just intuitive. You want to study with someone who struggled to learn it because they know how to teach it. Anyway, 2 cents. Jenny, I think you were going to.
Yeah, so like our curriculum with Girls Rock Camp, for instance, under normal times where they're learning guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, we take complete beginners, and in 5 days they can play enough of their instrument to write a song with their band and perform it Friday night. So we have a very, very different curriculum than like for our guitar curriculum than what I would do in my own private lessons with a guitar student. So like if I have a guitar student, usually we'll start with some open chords, but in 5 days, like a beginner who's never touched a guitar before will not be able to master an open chord or several open chords. I mean, maybe they will, but a lot of them can't, and they end up getting really frustrated with them. So we have a very different curriculum in that, like, it's just like maybe single notes on the low E string, things like that. So with all the instruments, we have that kind of curriculum. And when we get in a teacher who's a very experienced music teacher, they don't like that a lot of the times, and they don't understand it. And they try to do their own thing, and it's been really problematic for us. So we've actually found our best teachers are not these virtuoso music instructors who teach music by day. Or at least if they are, they're really open to understanding why we do what we do with our curriculum. So I think when we're hiring, I mean, one of the things we're looking for is youth experience. But other than that, it's like, do you play your instrument? Have you played it for a while? I mean, do you know enough? Because I mean, for the beginner students who have never touched an instrument before, as long as you know how to play better than them, that's all we need. So yeah, it's a very different kind of atmosphere we have. And also when we're hiring for our summer camps, normally we're hiring how many teachers? Like Allegra, 80 or something?
Yeah, like 60.
Yeah, we usually are like hiring a lot of teachers at once. So it's not like our standards can be super high. And then the other piece is we're really focused on diversity with our teachers because we've traditionally been very, very white. And in the past 3-4 years, that's been a huge, huge, huge focus for us. Because we want our campers to see themselves in their instructors.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else on this topic before we move on? One thing that we focus on at SLAM is we really, I mean, it has to be someone who knows the material really well, but also we talk about these things that we call kind of magic tricks, which are, at SLAM, we focus a lot on kind of the performative element of teaching. So like when you're in front of a class, it should be like basically a performance. And in every session, we want you to be able to pull some of these kind of magic trick moments out where it's like, if I do this and then turn this and then turn this, this amazing thing that you couldn't predict happens, right? Like it's like things that make students go, whoa. So we like a lot of those. And it's exhausting. I found that teaching at SLAM is way, way more exhausting than teaching at a university because university students basically have to be there. The SLAM students, they pulled a double shift so that they could afford to go that night. And to me, there's a higher, I don't know, the performance I have to put on is much higher, I think. So when we're looking for teachers, we're looking for people who know the material really well, obviously, but also can be a bit of a showman with it and can really get that inspiring level of teaching out that make people really want to do that. Okay, moving on to something else. Let's talk a little bit more? Oh, well, okay. So this is not a question that was on the list of questions that I said we might talk about. This is just something I came up with this morning. The panel description says one of the things we'll talk about is what is emerging in this field. So I wanted us to spend a few minutes on that. Like what technologies or methods or things like that is emerging in the field of music education in our own kind of niches that we found. I mean, we've all been thrust into online teaching, which I think is a complicated thing we could even talk about, because we could say this online teaching in the past year of music has been good or bad for music education. I could actually see it both ways. But let's start with that. Teaching music online, as we've all had to do lately. What are your thoughts? Did it work? Did it not work? Was it good for music education in the long run or bad? That's kind of a weird question, but I'm going to leave it hanging anyway.
I'll start. I loved it. I'm hoping, I think as I move forward in my private lessons, even when I go back to offering in person, I think a lot of the students are going to stay online. And I ended up with a lot of, well, not a lot, but some students from outstate or other states. And that's been really cool. So it like expands who we're able to reach with both She-Rock too. I mean, we had several kids come to camp and our adult programs too from other states. So that accessibility has been really cool. Yeah, I think moving forward, like Allegra said earlier, we do have a lot of people that really liked the online experience. So we want to be able to offer both in person and online moving forward. That will be a little complicated, but I think we're going to have to make it work because it's just a different thing. I mean, we have a lot of folks who are introverts and they've just been like, I love this and I don't want to do these big group things ever again. And then we have other people who actually like aren't even coming to our online camp this summer because they are so done with online everything. So it's cool to be able to offer both. So I think that's going to be one of our big challenges going forward. But yeah, I had students and parents for a couple years prior to COVID asking me if I was going to do online lessons. And I just thought it sounded horrible. And I kept saying, nope, 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 nope. So I love that we were forced into it. And it was just one of those things within a couple weeks of like learning the technology and learning about Zoom and sharing your screen and like all the stuff that Zoom can do. I was sold. And I think it's not going to be too much longer where there's going to be some really cool platforms for music teachers. I mean, I know there's already some out, but where the latency is even going to be lower. So they're actually, because the one big drawback has been it's really hard you can't really play together or you can't accompany your student. I think in the hopefully near future, that won't be as much of an issue anymore. I know it has to do with people's internet speed too, but yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I actually felt more excited planning for our Girls Rock camp last summer because we've been doing the same thing, for the 13 years prior to that. And it's just like, okay, here we go. And I love it, but it's just like the same thing year after year. And all of a sudden we were hit with that and it was kind of last minute. And I was so excited. Like, I just felt like I came out of this part of me that I didn't even know was there. And it's like all these ideas and all these things we can do with this that we never thought because we were forced into it. So yeah, so I was a fan. And I'm looking forward to seeing what other technology comes out of this. Cause like I said, people are just every day I'm in a couple like lesson groups or teacher groups on Facebook and they're like, hey, check out this new platform for music teachers. It has like all, 60 million guitar tabs built into it or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff is coming out. So.
Yeah. I'll kind of say what I was kind of implying a minute ago, which is that I've been teaching online for a long time now. And I think the first time I did it, I was doing some work with McPhail a while ago. And they had an online lesson program, and I was teaching, I think, songwriting to some students, and they said, "Do you want this online student?" I said, "Sure, I'll give it a shot. What the heck?" And the student was in Kenya, and so it was just over Skype, and we had this lesson with this young woman in Kenya. And after that lesson, I was just like, my mind was just blown. I was like, oh my God, I just had a lesson with this student in Kenya. This is amazing. And I thought, like, how many parts of the world you can reach, how people in parts of the world that don't have like someone like me hanging out on their, in their neighborhood that they can get lessons with. This is amazing. So I've been a huge proponent of online education for a long time. The reason that the COVID online teaching made me nervous, and still makes me a little nervous to see what happens in the next 2 or 3 years, is because there were a lot of music teachers that were unwillingly thrust into it and did a crappy job of it. There's a difference. There's a different way you teach when you're teaching online. And especially I'm talking about when I'm giving like a lecture to a class. You do it way different, right? Like, I don't tell my normal stupid jokes when I can't hear people laughing because they're all muted. It's just a different style of teaching. And if you just try to just do your normal lecture in front of a camera, it falls flat. It just doesn't work. So I think, and especially this is true, I think mostly about this in the college setting, that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of students who just had a year of crappy online classes and are, for now and forever, not going to be interested in online education at all. But then there's also people like Jenny who did it and was like, oh my God, this is awesome, and probably did it great. So hopefully there's more of that than the crappy version. But I love it. It's the only kind of teaching I really want to do going forward. I'm kind of lobbying for my Augsburg classes to stay online, even though the students are like, no. But I really love it. I think I did, at the beginning of COVID, my big experiment was to dive into teaching in VR. I tried some classes, some music classes in VR. It didn't really work, but I think it could have. I needed a couple more tries at it. I only gave it a couple tries. I think if I did it like 10 more times, I'd kind of nail the flow a little bit better. But I think that's kind of the next thing that I'm looking forward to, is VR, using VR in music education. I think that'll let us basically get over that hurdle of like, I can see what your fingers are doing right now, but I can't see the position of your thumb behind the neck. But if I'm in VR, I can. There's all of these, three-dimensional elements that you can get back. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
That's very cool. I don't see that for us, but maybe maybe someday. I've just been inspired by like the music itself that our campers and adults have made over the past year. Is very different, because typically it's like we have guitars and drums and basses and microphones, and like you can produce a lot of music, but you can't produce electronic music necessarily that way. And the music that kids made last summer was so unique and like couldn't have been made any other way. So I think it's really cool to just see like that different expression of creativity. And as more platforms come out that are like similar to Soundtrap or maybe easier to use Ableton, we'll just see more and more cool projects coming out. So I'm excited for that.
I don't want to speak too long, but what I would say is that COVID has placed limitations on what we can do or what we thought we could do. And sometimes people are most creative when they have to work within certain constraints. When you're given certain rules, you sort of innovate in order to make things happen, because people are always trying to push the boundaries of what's possible. So I think we've seen a lot of creativity. The other thing I'd like to say, because of the constraints, the other thing I'd like to say is that what I'm noticing with the people that I've been working with and talking to at the school is that people are learning other things surrounding music, like editing, video production and editing, and promoting their stuff, and working with other people collaboratively. So I think that's another good, really nice and unexpected positive outcome of this really bad thing that's happened to the world. I just think the limitations have forced people to be really ingenious, and I think that has been a good thing to see.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's almost like I read a lot of weird science fiction. Somehow this is going to make sense in a second. Don't worry. And one of the things that comes up a lot is like extinction events. So like I might butcher the science on this, but basically there's some theory that like the dinosaurs were here and there's an extinction event. There's a giant meteor, and that forced human development to advance at a rapid rate. And it's almost like, I mean, we don't want to put like a positive spin on this horrible thing where a lot of people died, COVID, but it did force us into a position to where I think there's a lot of new technologies that were developed. There's a lot of people who open their mind to new methods of doing things. Even in the business world, I see this every day. Music world, I see it too. So there are some good things. Any last thoughts on that? I think we got time for one other topic to.
I was just gonna say, I mean, otherwise our grandparents never in a million years would have learned to use Zoom had it not been for that event that just forced their hands. Like everybody uses Zoom now, and that's crazy that it happened so fast.
Yeah, that's true. And I think about like, so I have a 1.5-year-old son, and so he knows primarily grandma and grandpa as like a person on a screen. And they, everyone's vaccinated now, so they were here because they live, in many states away. And they were here last week, 2 weeks ago. And he like right away recognized them. It wasn't a thing. He understands Zoom. Like he can't even talk yet. And he understands how Zoom works. And like it's fascinating. Fascinating. Grandpa still can't use Zoom though. But a 1-year-old can. Okay. One last thing. How about this one? So musicians who are getting started in any of our programs will be moving into our community in the next few years as adult musicians. What do they need when they get there? What pipelines are working and what needs to be changed? So I think the big question here is preparing students for professional life, either as a musician or just as a musically trained professional in another area. Anyone want to dive in?
I can say from the perspective of our community, safe spaces and safe venues to be performing in. It's been I'm sure we've all heard lately, like I think venues having codes of conduct or codes of ethics, because there's been a lot of talk lately where I've been surprised to hear that a lot of women in particular have had these issues, assaults, harassment, and they actually left music for a period of time because they just couldn't deal with it. So we've been excited to hear about the Aunties venue that's it's like open online now. So just kind of that whole safe space, I think, for the community that we deal with is going to be huge. And I think that can start off with what She-Rock offers, and then hopefully times are a changing right now with that. But yeah, and also just like having mentors, like we talked about before, is huge. Just the kids need mentors. They need mentorship.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Anyone else want to?
I think also, I mean, in addition to mentors, just like a supportive community to turn to when questions come up or when like they just need a musician to fill in. There's a lot of Facebook groups that maybe some of you have heard about. Like there's a Twin Cities music community. There's one that's specifically for women in the Twin Cities music community that helps people find gigs, helps people find new bandmates, and just having like these different points of access through mentors, through community members, through teachers, any extra people that can be involved in your music journey. It's always helpful.
I think the young people now are doing a good job of making their own way, or like you're saying, sort of making a new way of doing music. And one thing I'm thinking of is we've got a group of musicians, producers, DJs, MCs that have come together and are starting a new monthly open mic type thing that they're calling The Good Life Minneapolis, which is, there's a whole history of this movement started in Los Angeles, but they're basically saying, there is a music scene, and we might not be able to initially penetrate the music scene in Minneapolis, but we're going to start our own thing. We're going to start our own music scene and be really inclusive and just, make our own thing and play music that way. And I think that's been a really a cool revelation for me, because when I was in rock bands, it just seemed like this impenetrable wall that we couldn't break through, and now I think kids are saying, well, we don't need to follow the rules of the scene anymore. We can do our own thing and make our own scene, which I think is great. Not sure I answered the question, but that's what came to mind.
I think that's a great answer. You're basically saying one route that students could go is, start their own thing, like team up. The people united will never be defeated. That general idea. I mean, isn't that the kind of origin of the whole of the Prince story and the whole Minneapolis sound? Was just saying, screw it, we're going to do our thing, and that became a huge thing because they were doing it and they were doing it well. So power to them.
Yeah, this scene, I've only ever lived here, but it just feels very cliquey and very gatekeepery. So I love that. I feel like that's what we've been doing with She-Rock too, for the last 15 years. Cause like there's tons of like these bands now that have come out of She-Rock, and like when we need a guest performer for some event or whatever, we just like have this list of bands we can call now. And so they have kind of created their own scene a little bit. And I feel like if one of my bands, like one of the bands I've been in they've been around for like 40 years, the Flaminos, and they're in a different scene than these younger bands. And like, I would imagine if we were like, hey, you want to open up for us at this, they would have been like, nah, like, cause they're just not impressed, with the older people. They just have their own thing going on. So, so I love it.
I've been a part of 3 different music scenes in 3 different cities. And I would say that and I'm very aware of this, that this perspective is very white cis male, but the Minneapolis music scene has been the most welcoming and friendly that I have experienced. One of the other ones I found to be brutal. Just like every door was closed unless you were like of a certain level. So, I mean, I always found it really, really nice and welcoming here. But I have a very narrow perspective, unfortunately. Any other thoughts on this before we begin to wrap up? You know, I'll add one thing. One thing that I see a lot in young musicians, and not universally by any means, but the general thing is just a general professionalism that's needed. I think there's a lot of, you know, somehow coming up as a musician, maybe seeing some rock stars, having some role models where you're thinking, cool, I can show up an hour late, a little stoned, and do great. That doesn't really work. I mean, that works if you're Machine Gun Kelly, but it doesn't work if you're, you know, playing a gig at 7th Street. Maybe it does, but if I'm involved, I'm never going to work with you again. So, I don't know. I see a lot of that, and I would like people to know that it's important. You can still be a punk and be on time.
And to kind of follow that too, I've noticed with a lot of younger people, like for instance, people that I hook up for gigs and recommend them for this, they never follow up with me and say thank you. And it just seems so weird to me, just like basic manners. It's almost like, that's cool that you did that, but I don't really need you. Like when I was their age, I mean, I was, you know, I had all these, the teachers, for instance, that I worked with at Music Tech, you know, like I was going to all their gigs, hoping they'd ask me to come up and sit in and hoping they'd recommend me for something. And I was just so thankful for them. And I don't know, it's just a very different, so it's different now, but just the kids, they need to just make sure to say thanks for any favors people do for them like that. Not take it for granted.
And that kind of stuff goes a really long way. I mean, because so few people do it, I think when someone sends me, you know, like a follow-up like that and says, thanks for that connection, that means like, okay, you just went from the middle of my list to the top of my list in terms of like people that's going to get another connection. Because nobody does that, you know? So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Okay, we're almost out of time. I thought as a way to wrap up, maybe let's go around the cube one more time and give us each an opportunity for a shameless plug. I don't know if MM Music Coalition allows this or sanctions this or not, but URLs, whatever you want to say. Any sign-up opportunities, registration cutoffs, anything that people need to know to get in touch with your organization, shoot it out. Allegra, do you want to go first? Oh, I think Allegra froze. Oh, no, there she is.
Am I here? Okay, cool. Yeah, so we are currently still accepting applications for campers for Girls Rock and Roll Retreat 2021. It'll be virtual again, like I said earlier, so we're calling it Studio Edition. Anybody from the ages of 9 to 16 who identifies as a girl or a non-binary or a transgender youth is welcome to attend, and we have lots of scholarships to give out, so do not let money dissuade you from signing up. We also have Studiolab Solo coming up for adults. That'll be, our last Studiolab classes were like for small bands, but this one will be just one-on-one, I guess, us, the teachers, and you, the student, creating your own songs. So you can sign up at sherock.org for both of those.
Bart?
There we go. So mplsmusic.org. We are now enrolling music immersion education. Please tell anybody who has a kid or who is a kid who loves music, sign up. Just go to mplsmusic.org, Minneapolis School of New Music. And we're working, by the way, we're working with Slam, She-Rock, and all sorts of other cool music organizations in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So again, I'm okay with plugging this quite a bit. mplsmusic.org.
Nice work. Jenny.
Yeah, I'll replug Girls Rock and Roll Retreat this summer. We do have scholarships available. We don't have a lot of spots left. I think we have maybe like 10 or 15 spots left for the 2 weeks. But and then we've been doing monthly online open mics. And our next online open mic is May 22nd from 6. I can't remember if it's 6 to 7 or 6:30 to 7:30, but it's on our website, sherock.org. And hopefully, once we kind of make it past the whatever happens with when people start doing more things in person indoors, we'll get back to our bi-monthly open jams. And we used to, our most recent space that we did that at was at Mortimer's in Minneapolis. But we've actually been doing those jams longer than we've even been doing Rock Camp. So I think I started co-hosting those jams with someone else in 2004. So those have been going on for like a long time. And it sucked that we had to stop doing them for COVID, but at least we replaced them with the online open mics. So those have been monthly. So what our open jams are is we have like an all-female non-binary trans house band, and we have it's kind of like, live karaoke, except you can come up and play any instrument or sing any of the 70, 80 songs that are on our set list. So I'm really looking forward to getting that started again. But in the meantime, online open mics, and we're hoping to do some more in-person programs and events this fall. So again, sherock.org. Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll plug Slam Academy stuff. Slam, electronic music things, Ableton Live, mixing, mastering, making beats, whatever you like. We have rotating enrollment. So there's basically a new class that starts every month. So if you're interested, slamacademy.com. We also have satellite locations in Denver, Chicago, Indianapolis. Denver, Chicago, Indianapolis. I'm forgetting one. That's dumb. Anyway, there's another one. And online, of course. And then also Augsburg, if you want to get a degree in music business, it's probably not too late. It might be too late to enroll for the fall, but shoot me an email. We can figure it out together. And then I think maybe just to wrap up, I'll say, for anyone that this is a secret to, all three of our organizations work together kind of a bit. I'm really excited to see what the School of New Music comes out with and how that shakes out. I think they're doing some really great stuff. And when I'm teaching at Augsburg, I can't tell you how many students I have that come in as freshmen, and I say, "What's your background?" And they say, "I went to She-Rocks, or I was a part of their program in some way or another for several years." So everything they do is just awesome. So we love them. I think we're out of time, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this panel. I hope it's been fun for everyone.
Thanks for hosting, Jay, and thanks to MMC for having us.
Yeah, thanks to MMC.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's
Thank
good
you.
to see with you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye.